Commander Lisa Grant stood in the observation room of Earth's military station, watching the Galactic Council proceedings on the massive screen. The transmission came from the central hub worlds, thousands of light years away, but the technology made it feel like the Council members were right there in front of her. The ambassador was on his knees now, actually on his knees. His four thin legs shook as he begged the Council to send military help. His voice, translated through the universal systems, sounded broken and desperate. Behind him, images of his burned. Cities fell to enemy bombardment. Ships crashed from the sky. Lisa had been watching space warfare for 30 years. She had seen battles and conflicts, but she had never seen an ambassador lose all dignity and beg for help like this. The Empire had begun their invasion 3 weeks ago. Everyone on the Council knew about it. The Confederacy was not a major power. They were peaceful traders and scientists. They had limited military strength and even less will to fight. They saw them as easy prey. The Council debated for hours. Lisa listened as one species after another gave reasons why they could not help. The Parliament said they had signed neutrality treaties. The Coalition said their ships were occupied defending their own borders. The Mechanical Collective said they had no interest in conflicts they had not caused. It was all nonsense. They had ships, they had weapons, they simply did not want to fight. Captain Robert Hayes sat beside Lisa. He represented Earth at the Council. He was a good man, careful and diplomatic. He had urged the Council to consider their moral obligations, but when the vote came, even Earth abstained. The Council voted not to send military support. "We cannot break our agreements," Captain Hayes had said to Lisa before the vote. "The Council has rules. We cannot simply insert ourselves into every conflict." Lisa understood the logic. She did not agree with it, but she understood it. The galaxy had learned long ago that military intervention without proper authority led to chaos. The rules existed for a reason. But watching children run through burning streets on that distant screen, Lisa could not care about rules. That night, Lisa went to her office and locked the door. She pulled up Earth's military records. The planet had a fleet of ships. 30 years of buildup meant they had decent weapons and good training. Most of it was kept close to home. The governments of Earth thought space was safe now. They thought Earth was secure. Lisa began making calls to officers she trusted. She called people she had served with for decades. She called people who had shown courage when it mattered. She did not tell them what she was planning. She just asked if they would volunteer for a special mission. The first person to say yes was. He was a tactical genius who had worked with Lisa for 15 years. When she called him at 3 in the morning, he listened to her voice and asked only one question. "Are we doing something the government does not want us to do?" "Yes," Lisa said. "Then I am in," said. By dawn, Lisa had commitments from 17 senior officers. By the end of the day, she had volunteers from every major branch of Earth's military. Thousands of soldiers, pilots, and technicians wanted to be part of whatever Lisa was building. She selected carefully. She needed people who could think for themselves. She needed people who could handle the fact that this mission might end in death. She needed warriors, not politicians. She began gathering ships, small, fast destroyers that Earth's military had built for deep space defense, heavy cruisers that could take damage and keep fighting. She loaded them with weapons and supplies. She created a fleet that was not large by galactic standards, but it was mean and dangerous and ready for a fight. Meanwhile, on the Doctor waited for news that would never come through official channels. Had been born on the world as a human. She had lived among them for 7 years, studying their culture and way of life. She had fallen in love with their philosophy. They believed that all life had value. They believed in peace and cooperation. They refused to build weapons of mass destruction because they said the moral cost was too high. They trained soldiers, but they never wanted to use them. Had reported back to Earth that they were weak militarily, but she had also reported that they were good people, honest people, people who deserved help. When the attack came, knew what would happen. She knew the Council would debate and do nothing. She had lived in human culture long enough to understand how governments worked. So she was not shocked when official help did not arrive. But she was shocked when reports came of an unauthorized human fleet preparing to enter the sector. She did not know if it was real. She did not know if someone on Earth had finally grown a conscience. But she held on to that hope. Lisa Grant stood in the command center of the human fleet. 12 destroyers, 4 heavy cruisers, Dozens of fighter ships, not a large fleet by galactic standards, not even close. They had hundreds of ships. But these ships had been built by humans, and they were crewed by humans, and humans came from a world where survival was never guaranteed. Humans knew how to fight with everything they had. Humans knew how to sacrifice. Her second in command stood beside her. He was looking at the same tactical display she was looking at. The enemy fleet numbers, the enemy weapons strength, the odds. "We can do this," said. It was not a question. The news broke on every media channel on Earth within hours of the fleet leaving orbit. The headlines screamed across screens in bold letters: "Unauthorized military fleet leaves Earth. Commander Grant acts without authorization. Government condemns the action. The President held emergency meetings. Congress demanded answers. Military lawyers prepared case files for the inevitable court-martial." But there was a strange thing happening on the ground level. People began talking about what Lisa Grant had done. Some called her a rogue warmonger who had violated the most basic rules of military conduct. Others called her a hero who had finally shown the galaxy that Earth meant what it said about protecting the weak. The news channels split into camps. One side showed clips of Lisa Grant's military record, pointing out how she had always pushed boundaries. They said she was dangerous. They said she was a loose cannon who could not follow orders. They said she would get good people killed for nothing. The other side showed the footage They showed burning cities and families running from explosions. They asked the question that made people uncomfortable: if we had the power to stop this, why did we not? The President of Earth was caught in the middle. She could not openly support the mission because it violated every protocol and agreement Earth had made with the Galactic Council. But she also could not completely condemn it because too many people supported what Lisa Grant was trying to do. "We will not tolerate the use of Earth's military for unauthorized purposes," the President said in her official statement. But she did not order the fleet shot down. She did not launch missiles to stop them. Everyone understood what that meant. Lisa Grant was going to do what she had decided to do. The government would condemn her, and if she won, they would find a way to forgive her. If she lost, they would bury her name and move on. Lisa did not care about politics. She was focused on building a fighting force that could survive what was coming. The fleet traveled through deep space at maximum velocity. Ships stayed in tight formation. The crews worked constantly on weapons systems and defensive shields. Lived in the tactical planning room, he barely slept. He studied every piece of intelligence they had about military doctrine. He learned how they fought. He learned their weak points. He learned what they expected from enemies. What he learned disturbed him. They had never faced an opponent like humanity. They had conquered other species that fought the same way fought. They expected enemies to respect certain rules. They expected enemies to avoid civilian casualties when possible. They expected enemies to fight to win territory and resources. Humans came from a different world. Humans understood that sometimes you had to break all the rules to survive. Humans understood sacrifice in a way that most other species did not even comprehend. "We are not going to fight them the way they expect," told the senior officers in their final briefing before arriving at the conflict zone. "We are going to fight them the way humans fight. We are going to be willing to lose ships. We are going to be willing to take damage. We are going to be willing to do whatever it takes because that is what comes from being a species." Captain Aaron Mitchell commanded one of the heavy cruisers. He had fought in 3 different conflicts for Earth's military. He had seen combat and knew what it meant. He did not look afraid as talked about the battle plan. He looked ready. Captain Santos commanded the second heavy cruiser. She was one of the finest pilots Earth had ever trained. She had volunteered immediately when Lisa called. She knew this might be her last mission. She knew that people under her command would probably die. She came anyway. The fleet stopped at a supply station to take on final stores of ammunition and fuel. It was a neutral station, so they could not stay long without drawing attention. Lisa met with her senior command one last time before moving into combat range. They stood in the observation deck looking out at the stars. Behind them, Earth was impossibly far away. Ahead of them, the fleet waited. "I want you to know something," Lisa said to her gathered officers. "What we are doing is illegal. What we are doing violates orders. What we are doing will probably cost us our lives. I would not blame any of you for requesting a transfer right now. No one will think less of you." No one requested a transfer. "They are not strong," Lisa continued. They are not warriors. They are scientists and traders and good people. They value every single life. They refuse to fight because they do not want to kill. They see them as easy prey because of this. But they are wrong about something. They think that being weak means being defenseless. They do not understand that sometimes the most dangerous opponent is someone who is willing to die to protect those they love. Was on the world when the news came that the human fleet was entering the sector. She received the message through a secure channel from her supervisor on Earth. It was simple and direct. The ships were coming. Help was coming. She did not tell anyone at first. She was not sure it was real. She was not sure if the human government had authorized it. But the next day, the news broke across all the communication channels. A human fleet was approaching. The humans were coming to fight. The effect on the people was immediate and profound. For the first time, they felt like they were not alone. For the first time, someone else was willing to stand with them and face the darkness. Walked through the streets of the capital city. She saw hope in the eyes of people who had been certain of death just hours before. An alien species was coming to help. A species they had never fought alongside. A species the council had dismissed and ignored. The commanders did not know who was coming. They received reports of an incoming human fleet and they dismissed it. Humans were new to the galactic community. Humans could not possibly be a serious threat. Humans would surrender or run when faced with true power. That was their first mistake. That mistake would cost them everything. The human fleet came out of faster-than-light travel near the outer edges of the occupation zone. 12 destroyers, 4 heavy cruisers, dozens of fighter ships. Lisa Grant opened a channel to the command. "This is Commander Lisa Grant of the Earth Defense Fleet," she broadcast across all channels. "You will cease your invasion of the Confederacy immediately. You will withdraw your forces from this sector. If you do not comply, we will destroy every ship you have." The first missiles came at the human fleet with terrifying speed. They were designed to destroy large ships. They were weapons that had never failed against any opponent that had faced before. But the human ships did not follow the tactics that they expected. Instead of running away or forming a defensive shell around the planets below, the human destroyers accelerated forward. They moved into the heart of the enemy formation. Captain Aaron Mitchell commanded the lead destroyer, the USS Denver. He pushed his ship to maximum velocity. Alarms blared in the Combat Information Center. Weapons systems locked onto multiple targets. The crew worked with the efficiency of people who had trained for this exact moment. "Fire all forward weapons," Mitchell commanded. His voice was steady. His hands were steady. Around him, his crew responded with perfect precision. Human missiles struck the first frigate. The explosion was bright and violent. The ship tumbled through space, its systems failing. That ship was no longer a threat. But the cost was high. Return fire struck the USS Denver. Shields flared and failed. Hull breaches opened to space. People died. The destroyer was damaged heavily, but it kept fighting. Mitchell ordered full power to the weapon systems. If his ship was going to die, it would take as many as it could with it. This was something they did not understand. They had fought species that valued military victory. They had fought species that wanted to win with minimal losses. No species they had encountered was willing to accept this level of damage to their own ships just to guarantee an enemy's destruction. Commander Lisa Grant watched the battle unfold from her command ship, the USS Liberty. Tactical displays showed the positions of every ship, every weapon, every threat. She saw her destroyers taking damage. She saw her crews dying. She saw the mathematics of the battle, and the mathematics were terrible. The human fleet was outnumbered 3-1. The weapons were more powerful. The ships had thicker armor. By every standard measure, the humans should have been destroyed in minutes. But the humans were not following standard measures. "All ships maintain attack formation," Lisa ordered. "Do not break formation, do not retreat, protect thee at any cost." Was in the tactical center, coordinating the movements of the fleet. He had modeled this battle 1,000 times during the journey. Every scenario he had run showed the human fleet being destroyed. But he had also built in factors that they would not expect. Humans were willing to sacrifice ships. Humans were willing to accept casualties that would shatter other species' willingness to fight. Watch the battle from the observation center on the planet below. She was a scientist, not a military officer. She did not understand all the tactical movements, but she understood what she was seeing. The human ships were positioning themselves between the fleet and the cities. They were absorbing damage that should have killed them. They were doing it deliberately. They were doing it to protect the people on the ground. The observers next to her did not know what to say. Their entire culture was based on the principle that all life had value. They could not imagine a species being willing to die to protect others. But here it was happening in front of them. Captain Santos watched her weapons officers work. The heavy cruiser USS Houston had taken multiple hits. Sections of the ship were on fire. Life support systems were failing in some areas. The crew was operating in darkness in some compartments, working only by the light of emergency systems. But the weapons were still firing. The shields were still holding as much as they could. The crew was still fighting. "Damage report," Santos commanded. Her voice did not shake even though she could see through the viewport as her ship took more fire. "Severe damage to sections 4 and 5, the damage control officer reported. "We have lost 2 turrets. Shields are down to 40%. We can keep fighting, Captain, but not for much longer." "Then we give them everything we have for as long as we can," Santos said. She targeted a cruiser and unleashed everything her remaining weapons had. The ship was damaged, not destroyed but damaged. The commander, Vex, was growing confused. He had expected a quick victory. He had expected these unknown humans to either surrender or run. Instead, they were standing and fighting. They were accepting massive casualties. They were fighting like species that had nothing left to lose. This was not how warfare worked in Vex's experience. The human fighters were something else entirely. Piloted by warriors who grew up on the human pilots did things that seemed impossible. They flew their ships through asteroid fields at speeds that would have crashed any other pilot. They used planetary gravity to slingshot around and attack from unexpected angles. Pilot James Morgan was one of the best human pilots in the fleet. His call sign was Ghost because of the way he seemed to appear and disappear in combat. He had already destroyed 5 fighters and damaged 3 larger ships. His targeting computer beeped. A heavy fighter was on his tail. Normal tactics would be to run and find support. James Morgan did not run. He pulled back on the control stick hard. His ship climbed at an angle that would have torn apart most alien pilots, but James was human. He was built to handle G-forces that would crush other species. He turned on a credit and fired directly at the fighter. The enemy exploded. James turned and found his next target. Was making decisions that could not predict. He was sacrificing ships in ways that maximized damage to the enemy. He was accepting casualties that other military commanders would have found unthinkable. But each sacrifice brought them closer to victory. "Move the Houston and Denver into attack positions," commanded. "Concentrate all firepower on the flagship." "The Houston will take heavy damage," Lisa pointed out. "I know," said. "That is exactly why we are sending her." Captain Santos received the order. She knew what it meant. She knew that her ship would probably not survive what was coming. She gave the order anyway. The human ships moved together. They formed a spearhead that drove directly at the command ship. Weapons tore into them. Ships burned, crews died, but the spearhead kept moving forward. The flagship was hit again and again. The human ships were coming from angles that they had not expected. The human tactics made no sense from a military theory perspective, but they were working. After 8 hours of continuous combat, something happened that had never happened to the Empire before. A battle group began to retreat. One moment they were advancing. The next moment they were turning and running. It was not a coordinated retreat. It was not a planned tactical withdrawal. It was panic. The fleet had faced other species. They had never faced anything like this. They had never encountered warriors who were willing to die to protect people they had never met before. They had never faced an enemy that fought with this level of desperation and sacrifice. Looked at the tactical display from the observation center. The tide of the battle was turning. They were retreating. The humans were winning. The celebration on the human fleet lasted exactly 1 hour. Then the damage reports came in. The USS Denver was dead in space with only emergency systems functioning. The Houston had lost 3/4 of its crew. 2 destroyers had been completely destroyed, their wrecks now floating debris in the void. And the Empire was not finished. Intelligence reports showed that a second fleet was moving toward the sector. This was not a small reinforcement group. This was a full military operation with 3 times the firepower of the first fleet. They had realized they were facing a real threat. They were bringing overwhelming force to crush the human resistance. Lisa Grant made a decision that would define the battle and define humanity to the galaxy forever. Instead of retreating to repair and rest, she ordered the human fleet to move into defensive positions around the. She positioned her ships not to protect military targets. She positioned them to protect cities, to protect civilians, to protect children. The officers understood what this meant. It meant that the fleet would have to stand and fight with damaged ships. It meant that retreat would become impossible because they would be blocking the evacuation routes. It meant that if they lost this battle, the people would be slaughtered. "We came here to save them," Lisa said to her gathered officers. "We are going to save them. That means we do not move. That means we do not back up. That means we hold this line or we die trying." No one objected. Began repositioning the fleet. The damaged ships were placed in the center, protected by the still-functioning vessels. Human fighter squadrons were brought in from other patrol areas. Every weapon they had they would need everything. The second fleet arrived in System 3 days later. The sensors lit up with targets, hundreds of ships, fighters and bombers and capital ships all moving into attack formation. They were coming to end this. The first wave of bombers moved toward the cities. The human fleet moved to intercept them. But the distances were vast and the bombers were fast. Some of them would get through. The planetary defense systems would have to stop them. Captain Santos was on the bridge of the Houston when the order came to move the ship directly in front of a strike force. Her ship was already badly damaged from the first battle. Moving into this position would block the ship's retreat. If the Houston took heavy damage, it would not be able to move out of the way. "Helm set course to intercept the enemy strike force," Santos commanded. Her voice was calm. Her hands did not shake. "Aye, Captain," the helmsman responded. He knew what this meant. Most of them would not come home from this. The Houston moved into position. Behind her, the cities were visible through the viewport. Cities full of people, families, children, all of them depending on this one ship to hold the line. The bombers came in hard and fast. They had electronic warfare systems and countermeasures. They had been designed to get through planetary defenses. They had not been designed to face a human captain who was willing to sacrifice everything to stop them. Santos's weapons officers worked frantically. Missiles streaked out toward the bombers. One bomber exploded, then another, but more were coming, waves of them. The Houston's shields began to fail under the assault. "All power to the planetary defense shields," Santos commanded. She understood what this would mean. With all her power diverted to protecting the planet, the Houston would have almost no defensive capability. Fire struck the Houston again and again. The ship was taking catastrophic damage. Entire sections were sealed off as fires raged out of control. The crew in those sections were trapped. There was no way to save them. But the planetary defense shields held. The cities below were protected. The civilian population was safe. Watched from the observation center, she watched as the human ship took more and more damage. She watched as explosions tore into the hull. She watched as a species showed her people what true courage meant. "They are sacrificing themselves," said the military commander next to her. He was old and wise, and he had fought in battles before, but he had never seen anything like this. "Yes," said, "that is what humans do." The Houston was essentially a dead ship now. Internal explosions had destroyed most of the ship's systems. The crew that was still alive was huddled in the few remaining functioning compartments. Captain Santos was on the bridge. She could still move and still think, and that was enough. More bombers were coming. The Houston's weapons were mostly offline, but Santos had one more thing to do. "Reroute everything to the electromagnetic emitter," she commanded. "We are going to create a wall of electromagnetic radiation between those bombers and the planet." It was a last resort tactic. It would drain power from life support systems. It would hurt anyone still alive on the ship. But it would slow the bombers. It might give the planetary defenses time to destroy them. The emitter activated. A wall of radiation spread out in front of the Houston. Bombers tried to push through it. Their electronics began to fail. Their targeting systems went down. Some of them crashed into each other trying to navigate the interference. More fighters moved to attack the Houston directly, trying to destroy her so she would stop blocking their path. But other human ships moved to defend her. The USS Liberty took position off the Houston's starboard side. Destroyers formed a defensive perimeter. The human fleet was choosing to die rather than let the Houston fall. In the tactical center, watch the battle unfold. By every measure, they should be losing. The human fleet was badly outnumbered. Their ships were damaged. Their crews were exhausted. They should have been annihilated. But they were holding the line. They were protecting the cities below. They were showing the galaxy something new. The commander, a general named, was confused again. This was worse than the first battle. The humans were not fighting to win. They were fighting to die. They were throwing themselves in front of weapons to protect a civilian population. This was beyond ability to comprehend. Back on the world, something profound was happening. The people of the Confederacy were watching humans die to protect them. They were seeing beings who had never met them before, from a world they had never visited, giving their lives for them. Military officers began to mobilize. If humanity was willing to die for them, then perhaps they could be willing to fight for themselves. They began moving soldiers into defensive positions. They began preparing to fight alongside the humans. This shift in the attitude spread through the fleet instantly. The humans who were monitoring the communications understood what was happening. They were finally ready to stand and fight. Made a new plan. He would coordinate a combined human and attack against the flagship. It was a risky plan. It would require them to move out of their defensive positions and into the open. But if it worked, it might break the command structure and force a retreat. Lisa Grant approved the plan. She chose to lead it personally. The final assault lasted 3 hours. Lisa Grant's ship, the USS Liberty, led the attack directly at the flagship. Fighters moved alongside the human ships, finally fighting for their own survival. The two species fought together, and something remarkable happened. They fought well together. They provided tactical support and protected the human ship's flanks. The humans provided overwhelming firepower and did not retreat. General watched from his flagship as the human commander drove her ship directly at him. There was no strategy. There was no negotiation. There was only absolute determination and the willingness to sacrifice everything. Had ruled through fear and superior power. He had never encountered anything like this. The USS Liberty crashed into the flagship. The impact tore both ships apart. Lisa Grant died on her command bridge, her crew dying around her. But the flagship was destroyed. General was killed in the explosion. Without central command, the fleet began to fall apart. Some ships tried to flee, others were unsure what to do. The inhuman forces took full advantage. More ships were destroyed, more were captured. Within hours, the Empire made the decision to retreat from the sector entirely. The Empire that had conquered 12 worlds had been stopped by a small human fleet and a population that had finally found the courage to fight. It was not a victory that made sense in traditional military terms. By every calculation, the humans should have been destroyed. But humans did not always calculate things the way other species did. Humans came from a harsh world. Humans understood sacrifice, and humans had proven it to the galaxy. The aftermath of the battle was both celebration and mourning. The human fleet had survived, but barely. 3 of the 12 destroyers had been completely destroyed. One of the 4 heavy cruisers had been lost, along with most of its crew. The other ships were so damaged that many of them would need months to be repaired. More than 2,000 human soldiers had died in the fighting. 2,000 people from a world that had only recently joined the galactic community. 2,000 lives given to protect people they had never met before. The news reached Earth 4 weeks after the final battle. The announcement was made to a shocked world. The people who had condemned Lisa Grant for her unauthorized action realized that she had been right. The government that had prepared to court-martial her instead prepared for her funeral. But there was an unexpected complication. Lisa Grant was not dead. She had been in a coma for 3 weeks. The medical technology on the world was primitive, but it had kept her alive. When she woke up, she learned that she was being called the greatest human military hero of all time. The government sent official delegations to Earth. They brought gifts and gratitude and requests for a formal alliance. The Galactic Council held an emergency session to discuss what had happened. The result was shocking to many species. The Empire was formally condemned. Trade sanctions were placed on them. The Confederacy was offered protection under a mutual defense agreement that included Earth. But the greatest change was not political. The greatest change was psychological. The galaxy had learned something fundamental about humanity. They were dangerous not because of their weapons or their numbers. They were dangerous because they were willing to sacrifice everything for what they believed was right. Doctor stood at the memorial service for the fallen humans. The service was held in the largest gathering hall in the capital city. Thousands of attended. Even some members of the Galactic Council came to pay their respects. Gave the speech because she was the only one who could explain what had happened. She was human, but she lived she understood both cultures. She could bridge the gap between them. The humans who died here came from a world called Earth, said. Her voice was steady and clear. Earth is not a forgiving place. The weather is violent. The animals are dangerous. Even the climate tries to kill you. Humans evolved in that harsh environment. That is why they are different. She paused and looked out at the gathered. Most species in the galaxy believe that military strength comes from superior weapons or superior numbers. Humans learned something else. Humans learned that the strongest thing in the universe is someone who is willing to die for something they believe in. Humans learned that protecting the weak is worth dying for. That belief did not come from their weapons. It came from their world. She raised her hands. These humans came to save us because they believed it was right. They died because they were willing to accept that cost. They did not come for wealth or power or territory. They came because we called and they answered. And when they answered with everything they had. The response was silence. In that silence was respect. In that silence was gratitude. In that silence was the beginning of a new era in galactic history. 4 months after the final battle, the Galactic Council formally recognized humanity as equals, not as junior members who needed guidance, not as potential threats that needed monitoring, but as equals. The fact that they were equals was proven not by their level of technology or their military might, but by their moral courage. The Confederacy and the human government of Earth signed a mutual defense agreement. More importantly, they signed a cultural exchange agreement. Humans would come to live on worlds, would come to live on Earth. The two species would learn from each other. The monument to the fallen was built on the highest hill It was a structure of both human and design. It honored both species. The inscription said simply, "They came when we called. They stayed when others fled. They gave everything so we could live. This is how humanity shows the galaxy what courage means." Lisa Grant recovered from her injuries. She was offered promotions and political positions. She turned them all down. Instead, she worked for the human government on diplomatic missions. She traveled to species that had feared humanity and showed them that humans could be trusted, not because of their strength, but because of their values. Eventually returned to Earth, she wrote a book about her experiences that became a bestseller across the galaxy. In the book, she explained how a species born on a harsh world could be willing to die for strangers. She explained the connection between environmental challenge and moral courage. The Empire never recovered from their defeat. They did not disappear, but they became a minor power. Other species no longer feared them. They had learned that you could not conquer a galaxy through force alone. Eventually, someone would stand against you. And if that someone believed in what they were fighting for, no amount of weapons would save you. Years after the battle, a young child asked why the humans had come to help. Thought for a long moment before answering. She thought about Lisa Grant and Santos and all the thousands of humans who had volunteered for a mission that might end in death. She thought about human history and human sacrifice and the strange way that humans were willing to die for others. "Because that is what humans do," said finally. "When someone cannot protect themselves, humans come. When darkness falls, humans stand in the light. When others turn away, humans turn toward. That is not because they are strong or powerful. That is because that is what kind of people they are." The child thought about this. Then the child asked another question. "Will they come again if we need them?" Smiled. "Yes," she said. "They will always come. That is the promise humanity makes to the galaxy. We will always come when you need us." And on that promise, a new era began. An era where the galaxy learned that the most powerful species was not the one with the best weapons. The most powerful species was the one willing to stand against darkness. And humanity, born on a harsh, had shown the galaxy what that meant. "All units prepare for final assault," she commanded. "We are going to destroy the flagship and end this war." The human fleet, battered and bleeding, moved forward one final time. The forces responded. The sky around the world filled with fire and explosions. But this time, something was different. This time, the defenders of the were not retreating. This time they were standing firm. This time they had discovered that they were stronger when someone believed in them enough to die for them. The fate of the galaxy would be decided in the next few minutes. She did not know all the names of the humans who had died to make this happen. She did not know their families or their stories, but she knew that they had come when her people called. They had stood between her world and darkness. They had sacrificed everything. The battle raged for another hour. Then slowly the fire began to decrease. More enemy ships were leaving the engagement area. The human fleet had taken terrible damage, but they had survived. Commander Lisa Grant looked at the battle display. They had actually done it. They had actually won. The commander, a being named Vex with a massive body covered in battle scars, laughed when he heard the message. He had conquered 12 star systems. He had defeated species with far superior numbers and technology. An unknown human would not scare him. "You have 1 hour to surrender your ships and offer yourself as a prisoner," Vex sent back. "Then I will destroy you and move on with my conquest." Lisa closed the communication channel. She looked at, nodded. "All ships combat positions," Lisa commanded. "This is not a drill. This is not a training exercise. This is the moment we prove what we are made of." The human fleet moved into attack formation. The fleet, far larger and more heavily armed, moved to meet them. The battle that would change the galaxy was about to begin. "No, we probably cannot," Lisa said, "but we are going to try anyway." The fleet jumped to faster than light travel. Behind them, Earth's government was in complete chaos. News of the unauthorized fleet had leaked. Military leaders were being called before Congress. Politicians were demanding answers. The president was prepared to court-martial Lisa Grant as soon as she returned. But Lisa was not thinking about that. She was thinking about the burning cities on that distant world. She was thinking about children who had no one else to save them. She was thinking about the moment when people stop waiting for the rules to work and start doing what is right. The human fleet had 2 weeks of travel time before reaching the conflict zone. 2 weeks to prepare for a battle that probably could not be won. 2 weeks to say goodbye to the life they had known. 2 weeks before everything changed.